Ata giri lo tirak rar mered rabalu. Lendia ko mered dimla kalangan radios elmei. Michael ngaringi lo mered amel dal radios. Miguel adlom tok tigel olab omred a tok omred dilmi adios. Tigel tok omred aditir mereger rabelsir adolulu. Eda le kol damam el dios ngarayang dagi lutalom godorang klem. Emal mereka sulit merteltai material. Mereka sulit mereka melihat merteltai dan mereka bisa presiden tengah itu dongok lemar staff ringi vice president peklat itu mengerti gimal marah mamal meriau emodong yang klaim leng edal kau ngelo trugu les pada rugul toy. Karsel bal sedam melihat mamal wasing malgiram el mungul ar meredle. Emelulu giri ramring lurerir giri laklangar togo beca adar belau mablur belau. Mereka el tutadam Dios lagi mal di modal sarogul toy kam dengi gil ngara acendar tir megil ngara bedril bolosa el tutau umo oya ka otigai gergau malom sere gergau tigere gergau edam Dios momal tal dodu seluriul rangel gem mar adar belau amok lo adar legel mangal tel kabelmente bagi melmol medam Dios el dokter mama do suami melulu girar meredra belumam pols ilmral tigai ralom sere gergau abel tigre ngerkau ebelong tigai kai gerogul lobrao de kat magil el gira blumam pats el mosobla imel klangar ablur bela adam Dios pol modang sankle magimal di melmol melotor sital pesel sils was adam Dios pom tigai germam magerogul el banglam pol meral el meral kutbok klangar agul mok tigerkau to kubet adam Dios sakpo sia presidente ma vice presidente ramring lureri rabek el sils direk mo mo trir mom porer setir egel bek longarm makarior edam Dios pol silmeral selba akle to bet trablirir matlungal gartir selbek el silsil pelorior el msisi abdingir el tigay graring argaw longot bokla kat magil gila blur belaw marar bek la edam Dios agi direk lonito sisiu ran misaw telte ale bol modang sanklem agol ni tegaro gul nuam ontmam el ngarang klelang el gem limol gdidal Jesus Kristus el ngam ladra cruz el osoblam morar pol modang saklem kal Dios el dam ma Dios el ngalga ma Dios el edaring amen.
Adam el msala digon Kriste bengek bokwa blale Mr. President ngul miskaw wil total mar adar belaw rogul orang serida al sel belaw michael belaw bokwa blal miskaw bomdo tingem el total awrila ngania career adar media di blogger. Thank you.
Waisi malungil tuta plus malungil tuta mora vekla dala media ngartera al tuta malmsulang dia konora unu edra al tuta Kotaro le dong tial teal do susra ay budul maraklay mara bugul belaw bilung ebiraklay mar masil belaw present ra senate marogul senators the speaker marogul delegates governor small marogul governors speaker telay marogul speakers marlators rabek kalbulu mar tugobet sil susriyid el morar other belar rogui el ngara belura ngayang el mora hotchari giak mede ase kadong lam notib meu de minira dengi di gumra lo aseng namongila dengi namos edel la dadu lo yaktel melidiul mak pral merenga sular adra media rogun ngartela al tutau lagi da malo umra lo ase kemia angawal linguk rakabalment mang cloud tutela agi bermadameu ay bakal balsel mudada du imo mudangi gelingam cloud tutela rabalwat madi kuradi update tia controlling first week gid el ok mosel ngari al mutel alert terror minister gid akparan mutel tal maran maran asulira aradro olbira galulaw senet el malmle conductor hearing ertir malmle mre del aktam no sabela Mr. Udui minister Udui ma minister Obichang lo bangedre al tutaw ngakama vice president tamal maramam lo seng uknari bebira adan me magadat mage mongor tel alung le sel dilgide gdora malo braad magadamal al merenga sulela olbira galura ram lemre adal al actionary tir gilu ongerung seragotloro no se adal signer sel cross acta mangartia minister gida mang moriate ellele mo askari mangora telgib mo makataklisay kom dire kala sira bodamre karsel ceremony kadam lora airport mga minister Obichang am lor se le first time el ngia me orir bela igel kotel besel skogi ram rigel F-35 koma urureng sel koram sebseb ke it's interesting la igel skogi de igem nasta Alaska to mol tol seb gal mer bela naria imol buiger bela lo bantrir officer romogota aktriga ngase ngam katatal di busur belau ding ul bantrir tedri gamna Alaska me so trige mlartel goram ru exercise minister of nga diri kalasen mo ay sergi den gorap to ka marum gerger awngila al bol clavada and atrablu say what's going on igida diri kal mom satte al vice president mong bay mok muse say di I'm sure nga diri kal somin mom de sen kadigirel gera to gorap pif di sedel dula kida mde sen all through the week kom diogera germ kadamal di mre the respond di akmal mrenga sulela leadership ya sa leader ngel chairman MPS rel al time al ngara al president na ru mlogonge mloria meeting ergidel radra North Pacific radra Micronesia sera kotlurior sel meeting mlomre ge mloria sel press release el tilo badara amututara ongerul lurior waise eli el ngia wal blolom gatak lo ase gida alludela kada alludele gurus persel tinga dar bela lo ase al imol temegel mal beta don amrin di modo alludel skobangen en dia kada amma goniter se gidel el kaltareng e dol mol merilen multuire sel macreos communique sel macreos communique amodaling sel blel saini tigal president lo yakmadat el not mage wase kida amgada dur trigal salide wase kida el de la pacifica al sumen soada qaltarreg soada do rad e godul tuir serul da wase tial duira secretary general agirel mliwek ndigal girel guradi ngara tarablu e kida mlamo tial alada mlamo gim ragal ngari ngultuir seguid el telbil te te ada gallos el telbil en quradi mle al dura drongolir dingul tuiri seguida nga umra lo asemble kamanga lo singir tigel lo akmada del mei lo asetia tal se drogi ungi mo model el boniya igel senkionia wa el preditial al debel un kadamram lo mesang al sel diloba el bigosen lo degal lo tiriklisel gidu ulmulani waseng te alal dogi ungi mudur tia igal belu en walu luprida igal belu len gloria senkio será el senkio miltiud será el miltiud a senkio en bragatak lo ase ngare rukula bel muraigel el baby rablu el diagal tu espera todo lo sendia kadul tuira qualification gida mal dim de ase trigal terurubak tamal fully qualified مسيا أقول هذا مال ولدو برسل ولداس ولا شيء من بعد سال موين لو مسرني باي بدو بيجل difference سرقي ده بدو داخ إذا نيل تيا هذا الغرا تيا لوك بلورا مايكرونيسيا ولوك مو متقلل تيا للدبال المرا الملا لول مرق دي ملاك بول وايسه من ملتوي رايجل يا هذا تيليبر هذا مايكرونيسيا راوي إقدم له لوليس الوال قتل غرلث لو التراق رسل الملتيب ويش قدم له اسمريس لو بيصير يدرا فيجي او ايسر ادرا فيجي واسي مودايم ادلا بي اي اف لو توي رسيد الاجريمنت ريد من التيم لو مرغ لغت اليور يقدم وادي دلوت نوم لي يصير شيء ما يقتل الدلاله ما يكونش ام لطمق او تبديا او الداسل لو تريكلي شيء من hoping mobla takrar adra blur bela lo ase gida degabo lagada adala FFA degabo adala yel tosen crop programs di selbe bira timing ngira del mo do or ayel do umral toy mayel blada tibel toy degal se del gora di daw sagrede wase ndegam beren uktim no aisen bol waisen no gida amle bla takra ulel wase tida position a blur belaw ma blura Micronesia gidat magal mururtia malsum mendegal motirak ay kita action at tay mang kada mo mura igel kada umra wasi namo time al igal blura al ngara mo budula dims ergid amoni at-talgib lomul irtil mura at-talbil gidam lisi irtil klaw marangara adlongolet saya adom marani toy misel talblal matamal sel klaw marargid engirad الموضوع واسي منام تمال كملام لا تيوديا اتيال كلول دبث engirad السوم اكلي sulang ra support ra other belau edik tirigal wais wase gida sel macros communigel blel pasania tirigal presidents adirigal blel support ni olbi ragalulaw umlania resolution diri kalau liu segi dak diri kami reach out dan morar ada dar olbi kalau lalu ase moment tertigal president tiada al dogi ungi kada lu dalam meruniat umra lu ase gida lu dal belu amla tergal kliat tokoy ma umro le da blak takla sea adulto ringi ngartel action dik update termilu ase proses ra forum wangara tetelel meng sel withdrawal ergid tarrak Dia dir klug ya bola kata adal. Kada malmon maladala forum el tarrak after segid el time ingwa the top of the ring. Of course on tidam lamo basi kada mo tuab forum of course in a process at tarrak. Kada mal dirigan mutu mo meser triala dia kadra. Di agumda sa atinga dabla katak. Gida alludala الأدرى ما يكونوا يجي لو بقل تاري سولا ذيك بوبرس يجي ده بايك open أولا الجيرة لا كير ماير كابون يجا كامبس ما نقول
Total Presidenta, actually since kami na PIF, ready para PIF. So in your discussion, in your meeting on Monday, kami trigger file MPS. The discussion ng dimnakal ko ra, of course yung blakatakal sila mabiling tilo ba to? The discussion dimnakal ko ra mura part to say. So if there's any chance for the MPS to, if there's gonna be any amends or reconciliation or like a movement back to the PIF, did you ever discuss on what kind of things needs to be done for us to move back to the PIF?
Da gida first gida dal tirakaniya sel wase talbiled wase al sum dal motirak gida tuwad mela gida tirak sayid ngari tarrak ngari omso del tel toy so agumda so al sel tarrak gida al mutel adadu sel blad offering ya bela wase tiamal beta do sadri dim durung gida al candidate terkami menwang klela le candidate terkami mlam brek omsaad Setara bled offering. Of course, I got toka aral de ogiungi. Di gida umral wase atarawel sumaklite tararal se drogiuni sumaklite al toy. Abolo turikli sel telbil rangaramo al blakatak wase tiagirel meliwekla. Lese all dagari. Mamang ay blada dura radara news sama ayang ay batoka ngarbe bulatebel di umral wase sel sum dial motirak la talbil engirad lo el blaktak le otisel el positioner git musu besen legeda mistrate allar a vice president ma trigal terun minister tsmada ige gambesen di qadmal umre de limura PIF adilungile benasem le PIF mun director menak enga mistrate al trigam tuk madu adan dimil ay sula vice president ka mamul
malungil tutawak ako lingit tambak sa alam minister abi ang magyukungar si maral metil kaya ko ra abi esal le join press conference
Malungil tuta president kauma kamsulang vice president ra ate allalol tau tratu irtial vital table Minister Udui, marbet الأدرى media. Chief of Staff for Gidalo Panget. President di Sodalo Ogi Utialte Alle edil mut el mga leera adrablu e mangloa rendir el wasaigal el skogil patol mlamera igam na momreg el club sail skogil ar soldar amrigela iga alongot mokl exercise ra makatatal longot mokla di el al time el simra border gid etirgel el soldado el mera belur belau el meurior ma ar adra civil ku PS el me ar mutamrael adigal sabaril ngaraigal commercial aircraft ar United ma bebil mang disco gira soldado transporter tirela mai gigida diregal luule asko el PS el member akiatim ra CB amlek merda e diregal ngarinya skogil di sesel club sei enguk memlair tirgel muutel maral wa yelu la isa president aigel el F-35 gambes aigeya hotel PS skogira militarira merigere el all time emno sebe el mei masel C1 doril mlet simulator exercise ra alu aigel skogi mandiregal mlei gatingel diregal mei assessment airport tergida amrael logiwa aurele kita ma FAA madiregal military ramrigel de kita rogul madengel wasa military ramrigel ongora ara defense tergid ya assessment tarwa airport tergid agirel DBS rabekel time mok mongaral togoy mang moringia albul elbo da sisabra al sele uspe anyes ra military etemadengel waseng wangara kondisyon ra runway belau wangara kondisyon ra airport belau ngaral skogi gire del sendel mo maula bek pedengel skogi selorul assessment bek pedengel aircraft alola bel mei test guk marael diregalo sisi ultai me gidam dengel wase selngesora giwa military ra merigel lurol ngara au runway rangayaura adirga maraela mang ngaringia ara adal lemei etu timel morsei il continue aigel improvement ra runway di tiagida gire del momdangli ara adal morsei angaringa cloud ngerigit et morsei o sisiul time ya u era lebong erbulisa morsei mengi retir mesel lebong erbulisa manggar selurior manggar retir mendakabel el tura al sela ang community e diregal mangara adrablu mendakabol sisabra al sela gelurior tial tokora covid ma diregal tokora safety ra ar adal tira aktiva uror el almaraira auranway e diregal malmo o sodal subde tira adrablu lo ase tirigel adal merbelau merde e momru laureol lo kedra adrablu maluben gombali ngarang molmu trar sibi tirigel selamet mora quarantine el 14 days au era lemet subject el submit el mergid aigel negative test result tertir e alemei etel mutel test tertir et mura quarantine ang maigel test ra u eral to release ra aigel polmerega kalsira quarantine el mera ablugong Kardi mutel gilo render atrablu president wasya aureor ma o aigel talentengila tialuror ra covid mo omrolir adal mei ma military ma aureor lo label melsi sebrebelau adir malmol ma aigel ul de tilip el make sure aigel ro kuil omersela tlingta mat rakta de abel si sebral chabelur belau logi wa aigel gitelo maraira a militera mirigel malube igal bebir omrael merbelau ahí de agua se ve del señor presidente Sula.
Minister. Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning. Good morning, Vice President and Chief of Staff. Good morning to all the press here today and those listening in to the program. Just a few words. I will be making some comments regarding the CROSS Act a little bit later in our talk show. Just to thank the Congress for, again, for confirmation of our appointments so that we can get to work, and for passage of the extension of the CROSS Act, which is the first legislation passed by the government this fiscal year. I think it's appropriate that this, under this new administration rather, but it's important that we continue to think about these people who are affected by the pandemic, and the people that we have been assisting, and those who need assistance, and we continue to provide assistance to them. And myself and my team, and of course the President, are all working in this direction. We hope to have a clear direction for you to the press, to the public, and specifically to the people who need this assistance as soon as possible. We are also working on the national budget. We expect to have that submitted shortly, as well as work on funding for the shortfall of budget that we expect to happen this year, as well as shortfalls next year. We're working closely on the requirements that it will take to avail of that money. And then also important to mention, part of this, the reforms required under this funding is the tax reform. We hope to have that bill ready for the OEK probably by next week. So we have several things we're working on. Current task that we're focused on right now is getting ready to start dispersing money to those people who need assistance under the CROSS Act. So thank you all for listening in, and I'll pass the mic to the Vice President to share some words.
Malungil tutaw, Mr. President, yung tutaw Minister Udui, Minister Obichang, Chief of Staff, Maroko members, Press ng RTL tutaw. Happy Wednesday. Tira ka mlara training workshop opening ringira audio sile ang Kaleb workshop protection, gender and social inclusion in disaster risk management training. Madamal lorang asulela Ambassador Karasawa, the government and people of Japan musil lo support that they give the workshop that's been being organized by NEMO, Director Tawaira NEMO, Imala National Emergency Committee, Mr. Bureau of Gender and Aging and Disabilities, Dr. Claudine Singeo, Madirakal Executive Director of Red Cross. Tiang aklo abilgul training aling ngol si sa akra wasem karada provider sel kotulungil el service el sabael el address specific needs ra community across pekrogul men ar saal mardi lama ar mikikrel ngal kal saal mardi lamang mo sabi dal klakar kaltmokra alboring yakura tautadi. So it's a preparation for Waikiki disaster management. Mandi sokal lobrang sulira tigay del ngar sa del training. Direct lobrang sulila His Excellency Ambassador Karasawa for their support del malumol malisi a communities rigid salba akrat for disaster events. Direct Sokaloguteng Oaiswa Embassy of Japan is holding its annual 11th Japan Fair. Mak malum tera Ambassador Karasawa invite Rebecca kul other most of Iran may join. That's going to be happening at Sunday, which is February 14th, 2021. Amayong Cultural Center from 1:30 and 4 o'clock. Ogyusegi they invite their other most of Iran may join in that Japan Fair. Tiamo ang 11th Japan Fair, Mr. President.
Mr. Klein. Yes, please.
Malito kanila sa asado yung halibakstad. Yamo after. Malungil tuta President, if I make direct a question on more Minister Finance. Kami mention na sa morning at later on in this program, mo masada cross act. I guess we're there now. I have a couple of questions. So local what the extend the life of the cross act specifically in section 3 na ala. And din dia ka specifics assume na sa specifics sa mga implemented nga regulations. Ako tal question so kalas kanya say mo require a change sa regulations in order for you mo start disperse though the alubeng ngaringia already ngaringia al sela regulations actually will the dispersal ngaria although la presenta last el gugeren waseng ngaringia mo change sa klungel auto don more adrangot of bloom sel bolola ngaria other belaw mga question waseng obo committee already mo disperse sa payment ngaringia changes and mo occur also moringi yung kel moringi regulation alun di miluri el all time the only question and I'm sure ngaria career adel gedel tiang Marcel, ngarikel private sector relief items under section 3 ya wanaringi ya wabol require igel baby na agency mo wap SS ma tax ma pension PPUC ma PNCC el motiakal disconnect the service el mora arat ma question awa say since itella am lamangay malamolama alubang ngaringi krisi illegal agency decide on their own la say ndaki aki mo disconnect kikita ko atoblo question kaske and then I'm sure ngaya ko ra career baby dara.
Just a quick follow up. When is the first disbursement?
All right, I guess we're moving the topic to the Cross Act. Let me just brief you on the talking points I wanted to share with you today regarding this matter. The President signed the bill into law on Monday this week. The bill specifically, or the act, extends assistance under the law for 2 months, February and March. That's the first thing that you have to understand. The previous assistance ended in January 31. This law extends the assistance period another 2 months to the end of March. Appropriation was made from the monies available for $1.5 million to cover disbursements in those 2 months. In addition, the OEK approved retroactive pay for those workers under the temporary work program who were continued to work from February 1. So there was a letter that was sent out by the administrator of this particular program that told all of the employees that their assistance would end at the end of the program period. So those people who continued to work were not working under the assumption that they would get paid. The law provides for that. For those people who did continue under that assumption to work, we would be able to provide assistance to them for those hours that they worked. Of course, the regulations need to be amended to reflect the change in the deadline for the program, but we do not expect that very much changes will be made to the program itself at this point. So we're only talking about 2 months. We don't have a lot of money to provide for all of the programs under the regulations. But we do estimate that there is enough money to support the participants of the program as of the end of January 31. So we do have enough to provide support. We need to update the records of the participants in the program. Some of their status may have changed. Some of the status of their employers may have changed. So we need to do a stock take and determine what changes there are. There is also going to be an emphasis on employees returning to their jobs. So this is something that we will emphasize as we administer the program these next 2 months. We also would like to support the employers in the private sector to start having their people return to their businesses. And one way we're going to do that is we will continue to disperse checks to the employees, but we will provide those checks to the employers to distribute. We also will continue to support payments to the Social Security on behalf of the employees so that they will continue to have health insurance and MSA. The funding that we expect to disperse will mostly be made out of the Unemployment Assistance and Work Program, with the emphasis going to the work program. And for those employees that need assistance in the work program, we will be emphasizing that that work that they do is productive work, not just clerical and sitting in the office just getting paid. We'd like to see some improvements made to the work environment so that when we resume tourism and our economy starts growing, that we are ready to accommodate for that growth. The funding source has two purposes. The first one being humanitarian assistance and the second one being economic recovery. So we have to remember that this money is also to help us get back on our feet when it comes to the economy. There is not a lot of time to continue this program within 2 months. In addition to resuming support for people who need assistance, we will be also making recommendations to continue this program after March 31st. And that's part of the intent of this law that, if you read the law in the findings, that is one of the intent of this measure. So we will be also working on coming up with a program to continue assistance. And this also means we will also be looking at including those people who may need to join the program. You know, if you remember, we did close the program last year for new entrants, new people, and we think that there's been changes in the employment situation from then until now, so we'll be starting to look at taking in new applications. That's all I have to share with you right now, and if you have any questions that I didn't answer, Lei, I'd be happy to answer that specifically. The first checks, Kambes, what can we expect?
For February, maybe 18th or 19th. So
Yeah, middle of the month.
Humanitarian assistance, if it's possible.
We'll be convening a meeting with the heads of the different departments that are involved, and that'll probably happen by this Friday. And we will discuss how to implement this payments going out in a quicker fashion. Yeah.
I'll ask question and then let others ask the questions. The one question asing Exceltora disconnection service of services, autonomous agencies. Yeah, other question I say ngalingi komite sa komo in wam kwaste ka texta or inventory ra program. Ngalingi gel baby ra akong bali na close. El mang tergel adal mlartel program as part of recovery program I'll return on mora ngaral kong bali. And those are some of the questions that are going around.
Lei, as I said earlier, we will continue to support the programs that were existing at the end of January. That includes the utility subsidy program. With regard to those people who may fall through the cracks, like their company had closed for good, of course, the transfer program under the Bureau of Labor still available to them, but we will continue to support them if they were under the program and provide some assistance while we work on the transition.
I think just to be clear, we're going to make some modification to the programs. And like we shared in the other press conference, the big part of that is instead of having workers work in government offices, we want those workers to go back to those companies, and we'll provide assistance to pay them. So that'll help those companies get ready for if the tourism comes back. I think that's, so, koradi, Amrigela, Amal Mokte Gargid their program, so that make sure and the other more rather olel malubang, Matamala, other Klel, Emil Molmang, one more tier. Tiel la Maldi Erul Buil, the Sel Blado Southernira, or Ea, say, Kadamomalasam, el Trigrad, Drigaria Gombali, Lowering, Trigrad, Lutumura Gombali, help per till get things ready. Give them the other thing, I'll sell full amount and the sell them the other thing, let's say, half ratemir and at least an area of those, a labong malora, instead of the almost 3 of those Madil, Laudo de la Laureur. Seguida, I think that's a close change. Tell Gida, and yes, Bodor top of the kneeling. The Domral was saying, Lungil activity or ruling Radidor of Dodo. Akmea Gamitirida, I mean, a minister Maradalamo, Messri, and make sure and Maria Moxel require the amendment a regulation. And then, of course, that checks February 18, my 1980. So, es important el direct leaders modia ngari tigela mil mol malorior under tial program alla amlum gataklil wase tirgem tedreg الموضوع ده هي السوم التلوريا هي تميره retroact مقابر تير مرسوم تسميت تايم شيت تير es el programa PVA مقابر تير okay مسؤولا.
Good morning. My question will be for the Minister of Finance. You mentioned about the tax reform. So there's a measure introduced in the OEK. The tax reform you're talking about, is that the same tax reform? And should that accompany the national budget? And at the same time, there's also there's several economic bills introduced in the Senate, including minimum wage. Is the timing of the minimum wage in this kind of environment, will that be also a priority? And then, and to Mr. President, in the vaccine front, because the hope of reopening the economy is tied to the vaccine effort. So how is Palau in the vaccine effort? Is there more vaccine arriving?
Thank you, Bernadette, for those questions. Yes, there is a bill that has been introduced in Congress, and we are working on how we would describe it to be a more comprehensive bill, and that would be the difference. But we expect that we will work together with Congress and put together the version that will be one measure that we'll be entertaining. Yes.
Just to add, Moral was a tax reform, Senegara Senate, Amal Lungil, Laurior. The Messenger was a rule more comprehensive. The GST or VAT, the more include our tax refund, wages tax, so restaurant excise tax, so more comprehensive, and business income tax. So, Minister, hopefully. Very soon, I'm saying the Lord seal, Maldik me Gador seal more Biralulo. While I say more amender cell Blalother seal.
Yes, Bernadette, the other question you had was with regard to the budget. We'll be submitting the budget, and I don't expect many of the changes in the tax reform bill will be applicable right away. So I don't think it'll have a major impact on the budget numbers. We don't want to shock businesses too much during the pandemic. We have other funding needs as well, but those we have to consider the state of the economy. Yes.
Okay, so you ask about also minimum wage. First of all, when it comes to minimum wage, I think that's a long-term thing that always needs to be addressed, and there's nothing wrong. And usually, it's a good time to address it now, whether we're in a pandemic or not. It's something that needs to be addressed. So I congratulate the OEK for putting it forward, discussing it, and you can make adjustments for the situation we're in, but I believe taking action is important. And so we thank the OEK for putting that forward. On the vaccine is coming regularly. The U.S. government allocation for this month should be arriving this week. We believe it's going to be around 3,200 doses, so that's enough to cover another 1,600 people. That'll bring our total up to almost 4,600 if we have those vaccines, which is good news because it'll be able to take care of most of the frontliners. And I'm talking frontliners that are outside the government, because now we've already taken care of the hospital, customs, immigration. Now they're going to expand it to like restaurants, hotels. Those are important because if we do open in March, we want those people to be protected. That was the original plan. Of course, we keep on modifying the plan, but we need to we need to plan for it. And so having the vaccines here and people vaccinated are a very important part of that process. So we want people to have confidence and not be in fear that maybe if, for example, somebody gets sick, the whole hospital is wiped out. That can't happen anymore because they've all been vaccinated, right? So that's part of our protection and building up our resilience, so that if we do open, we're controlled. I don't think we're ready to say, let's open up to the world, no. But it has to be in a controlled manner, and ideally in a safe manner with countries that we know are safe, and to go from there. So.
Mr. President, just a follow-up. You mentioned March. So there's a timeline on reopening?
Well, we're always hopeful. When I got elected in November, I was hoping that the first tourist flight would be here January 22nd. And so we tried to work for January 22nd. We haven't made January 22nd, but that doesn't make us stop trying. And we were hoping that maybe February, and now we're hoping March, but we keep trying. The good news is that the vaccines are coming, so we're better protected. And if our partners can continue to be COVID safe or COVID, then maybe that window can open and we can start that the travel corridor that we've been talking about. So we're continuing to be in talks and continuing to find ways that that can happen.
Sula, Mr. Presidente, Tamura, Minister of Finance, narakora sosra funding ilbomuspe ilgireltial extension na cross act le President tuip sa malum tiakal sola togal loan. Nara sosra funding ilbomuspe il funder tiagi del extension na cross act madirek il budget el sumang loan and sebemil explain kung ra loan source.
Yes, thank you, Salwe. The funding that we are using is the funding that we have been using up until January 31. That's the special loan that we received from the Asian Development Bank. Very, very, very low interest rate loan that we still have a balance for. Over half of the money that was available to us is available for this program, which is why I say these 2 months we'll also be looking at how do we extend this program, continue the assistance that we need to help these people and the businesses stay ready for an opening once it happens. The opening, the general numbers that we expect from a seal corridor is a little over $10 million. So we will still need budgetary support, which is why we're working on that particular loan from the Asian Development Bank, which involves several policy reforms. And this one will provide us, we anticipate, about 25 million for our budget this year. So yes, we prefer not to use loans to finance our budget, but these are different times, special times that we have to take special measures to address the shortfall. You know, there is some comments from the private sector about continuing government employment, but government is a large consumer, and funding government and salaries helps support the whole economy. So it's not something that we take lightly to to borrow money to fund our budget, but it does have an impact on the economy, and there's few alternatives than this. And the funding that we do get from the Asian Development Bank is concessionary rate, so it's cheaper than if we went to one of the commercial banks and borrowed for this purpose, which would be more less favorable terms, a lot more loan payments in the future that would also affect our budget in the future. So yeah, we are monitoring how much we're borrowing very carefully and trying not to borrow more than what we need, but we do have money for this year from these two loans that we're working on with ADB.
The further on that question, Minister, our understanding is that in the last administration, the 60 million that was originally requested for, the first 20 million that has been received, part of it is now financing this cross-act. The second tranche, which was supposed to be 20 million, was supposed to be made available in January. And I understand that one of the requirements for that was the submission of the tax reforms, these concessions, and those were done. So technically, my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, is that 20 million is now available for Palau to draw down, and the remaining 20 million is dependent on the passage of these policies. So are you guys withdrawing that 20 million, or are there still other requirements that need to be submitted before you get that for the second tranche, is what I'm asking.
Thank you, Ray. There are requirements that we're required to make, and there are procedures that need to be performed by the Asian Development Bank in their loan approval process. So we are putting forward all the requirements on our side. The submission of the tax reform bill is one of those that has to happen. It's one of the triggers that needs to happen for us to avail of the funding. But we are still within an acceptable time frame for submission of the bill, and then for Asian Development Bank to go through their processing procedures to allow us to avail of the money when we need it. So I think we're still in, if your question is about timing, I think we're still in line with the timing that we request.
It's not going to be available right now?
No, there was a delay on the Asian Development Bank side, is my understanding. So it delayed us a little bit, but we're still okay for funding our budget expenditure until when we're able to draw the funds from the bank.
Sulang ungil tutawa karika kura different subject ang kuam katatal kata yang sa isa lang sa president di update telwas ang kura wangara toksel kirala negotiations ra kokfa. I understand telwas ya lead negotiator amli vice president oilo wangara tama kukmo SL feel position.
Dia malu ngilager control serabol mereka a Trump en walgora tribu de go de la blue ramregel mukadamir agora uldoswir ma wasegado mukara about proceed right now everything is just resting on hold emir a response tir to triya warngila urol men stop ela kadamir ala ramregel wase la ngara next step di serang da do rieda to say insomma man maral da do ila 2024 adi maran me ding ya hada betitrin bor setala government tire ukta to bora next step but sulang rager
Question ng almora Minister Obichang. Kamlo mo sa sel military exercise ng larangi. Malu bedir ngarngi hindi ako dino siyang ding kwa malata ka blakat taklo si tirgat tangari crown troops ngara utumal lamurter oriom tamay tatang alu bang tim na sel refueling ara ay gang temle teray di sila soldado may sel mo sa dagil mo lang ayaw siya ngo ingarang teray di sila soldado at expected tir
sulang ikambes me ako te dik pagtaklil wasin dia ka kora di medidur tul di mga lair apalure el angal dia ka ungil teletelel Aigel refueling am naringi rai esel norangaura ara adang al mlorsei am mal di urior runway. Tadi continue gel improvement ra runway india ka. Giril marair atuel bal ilrob sigila buil. Ya tiregal lulbes el low isel was egal exercise kada adadu gid ma kabalmentra belaw ma kabalmentra marigel ma military endi ngarinya ungil cloud nge tirable all partra aldo do kabalmentra igel belu ar kabanor sa igal belu lobo or nge egal exercise ma kabanor ngaura well aware ma kabalmentra sel was igal gid activities ra military ang aringi diakal deal exercise igal gid support el improve runway ngaura ma bebira aureor auleng partra igang gida exercise kambesa sera do mura 94 el mere el angaigal exercise sablo ngaringira every year hindi la telgibel kora increase aigal because yang ra ot ngalela aigal military aircraft because hindi kaya commercial aircraft medidrut el sebaril ngaringar soldado may malubet di bebirar atal may Ingia number ar adal marura improvement exercise ra airport ay mena runway nga ore lang adi aksal lobang man sebekal mo provide ra exact number wasing antelar adal ngar serial time hindi aureol marar say a presence ra bulis ang nga aureol all time el make sure ay el cook safety measures malo udara wa covid mangrang adi akal matamal ra during ra gagidal activity ra military.
Salamisto Obichang recently tenomregal el weekend el foreign minister ablura sina to dia mal msisi el togoel mora que el secretary ra state ablura amrigen el mundial girel mo interfere ku internal maras ablura sina lo democrat ablura Taiwan. Yang artinya ikil military movement nasinan namo ukmedra Taiwan yang artinya direct el dialer amrigel en namo ukme tiagi de kora military vid abel mogor ngir bela kora parte se maluben tiagi de kora escalation attention man namo mukod mar soldar amrigel merbela
sel da para foreign affairs en mora vice president dik kulgol wase igagi del semdil wase bil da pesado en wado o leget garak mungarar elang diakang exercise sa marail igagi gel schedule exercise ra be karak ma me by sa vice president te kadam na karak ren segal mo ikrel
mal masora gere Mr. Talam sekti mo oy soy segel blaltung minister Obichang alwasay ay nga exercise ang tiakal alkura segit al malkuringil pong build up ka exercise that we're on to gagidal improvements al dome sa loreri ra gagidal marigel along nga sorgit so lang
Kora di modo litial exercise ng nagigimlar airport telo sa F-35 en to ay sa kama magimadura pilot to kasi agel sko gimlar alas kalme so sel seb gram lidio el merakwam they had to refuel 10 times en un selo gordir akwam emro continue merbela ser alberbela en si wandori ulta alu el meraskojo emlani askogir Australia gram lidio el global refuel ay skogi. Misal do exercise that's really what the trial was say okay mal top dring am real telarar sa dobal merbela and that's the process to help you know evaluate the direct subia skogi orgi because andara kan pakte triga mangargit mungila lo dongali el modulo speri ya first time li del F-35 am merbela before kana mas F-22 esa first time F-35 matuk tirigan me shunting on Mr. Runway either was one at the same thing I get exercise and I already regal area for el dial el mom li qra da bedra mlaga rara me su mara AMS the part of the exercise within the next few weeks el mom li qra da bel belam well, I get algo more all time. Aya bla lo ay sirgid el girel. O aya la amal beto am liwa kritial el debedamo. Igi da dim dengel wase focus ram rigel all time am la shift el budula Asia. Tiramal igi da umra usit tqol wase ngiriyad el mimokla el remurt tial de bela blulat. Gida amal support trablu amriga sel segundo sel la moya sen Indo-Pacific strategy tir umra lo se gida umra ra tora mitzisun government umra sen gida el mimokla gida el klaumra gida ulga dortuirat maglam gilam riga ya sula
President mal masulang at tama timan mo kay kare mamal di last question it the follow up persel question il kire la kampakta maka mention na sa blura mariga el al time awal ko ra tir katel gibe mingile o mesetel administration tir el guk mo kaltmokla and the understanding ako sel side git lariya al dadura o alelo say katuk ngotmok git el kire la gel al dadu mesel ba al mola al dadu e kita kaltmokla mangara ko ngara on our side ngara developmental la plan el kire la ko sel timergit.
So, simple answer diría integra timergid, guardar el UIC, Maria report el bolongot mokring la mesquid, and then gadamo dice was a next step forward. Dice que that's the current position at that time. Sula.
La molaste, Mr. Presidente. Del nombre que el press conference guluay sera aquel stimulus funding a Taiwan no se ve del census el incluye la prison en mo rehabilitation senten mania udo del mo mal tela ludo de la stimulus fund a Taiwan available mergar el al calendar year el se ve melo spearing el merula aquel el momtas en beber amla la platform calgirel el mgat mokrel arak
كده of course قدم المول الموضوع دور أرسلي ده ولين تانيس وقدر دارس project المورتير أو شيء كده ده عمره راسم كلو توتل for example سيرتورا prison لورا تايوان قادم نقل سال interested رجيل توي مكنو بقولوا سين humanitarian مبوضع مثل أوكي أنا أقرأ هذه مرولا رايل ترى قدر نسير عرف and exact amount هذا سال شو رجين دين hopefully malmolmra at the same level or incredible mosaic the circle to trela triam malmolmra no sergide in fact the wise was this afternoon agimo obis rigid ramiun se bolsi stop pad sum somi obis ministry health o ambassador Taiwan mo miskida email dar tela el nia solgire la tora covid so ngari selo meskida rabek rak di tedri qol toda bibir angya sul above and beyond meskida adal molmol malisi ringin lur mang sula
Can going back to the Pacific Island Forum issue, the wording in the communique looks like there's a wiggle room to make changes, or the especially with the Australia Prime Minister, the Australia government and the New Zealand government says they will do what they can to encourage Micronesian to stay in the Pacific Island Forum. So what do you think would it take for Palau to go back to the forum, and also has Australia, New Zealand reach out to Micronesia and the other leaders regarding this major issue?
So really I had two observations at the meeting. First, it was clear at the meeting that we were talking about COVID, for example, and Australian assistance to the Pacific. And clearly, when it comes to assistance, it's focused on the South Pacific. It's not focused in the North Pacific. That's one area. And then, of course, the vote came out, and obviously we want the South Pacific. So I think those two issues kind of drive the point that Micronesia was trying to make from the beginning, that if we want to bring the Pacific together, we're all Pacific brothers. Let's treat everyone equally. And that's why it was so important that we have the rotational, that the SG would be selected on a rotational basis. I think what's clear is we need to move forward, because we said we want to get a divorce if you cheat on us, right? That would be a simple way of putting it. And so, you know, our heart is broken and it needs to be fixed. So, and that may require a lot of chocolates and whatever, but I think we can start with flowers. So, but I think, you know, that's if you say wiggle room, yes, we have one year, and we have, I think we've made our positions clear, and yeah. So, thank you for the question. Yeah.
Adalo ay siya Mr. President kamay masulang kau Madam Vice President at Secretary Minister kau. Di kani.
Ngari last one.
Okay.
Ngari first the Saturday night and Moria night market tara PVA. Usually in the Friday night and the elam lamos el Saturday night. So muna sulir tara PVA girel say. Ongirong ngari atugubet silsil sira ومثلا تتوال الوكا أوريول لو من جذا الغرا قبل منت من سوق الدي مورق وناي سرتير كترول غريا كلين كينتو ماذا هابي بوردير مورا مستر كلين كينتو اللي غرا Bureau of Marine Resource ديري غريا مالسول نبوو غرا Fire and Rescue هابي بوردي ما ستيليندا غابرييل هابي بوردي غرا بلا هاي سكول ما ديري غل Akisi Kotaro, Gangara Bureau of Nursing Hospital. Happy birthday. Kada Dulmura Wige, Vice President, congratulate another year, and I think we should always be thankful that we're blessed to live another year, especially in these COVID times. Nangasula Dios podong simula programa idam sulang eblas. Sula rower adra media no sil chuan gidrela.